This is the Opening Market Podcast on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Talking with Joe Camp of Commstock Investments. And Joe, grains look like they're off to a positive start here for the day. Tell us what's going on.
Firmer grain futures, we have a reverse or a turnaround Tuesday, if you will, of the mostly weaker action at the beginning of the week. This week started off like last week finished in the big outside market volatility and its influence on the agricultural sector. We've been talking more about commodities and their run up in price together over the last several weeks, including leadership from the metals, silver having an outstanding rally and remarkable volatility, rallying above $100 an ounce, and then on Friday giving back $35, which is a huge swing. Historically, you have the dollar moving, the equities reflecting some nervousness, news about central bank and politics there really driving a lot of uncertainty. But to the grains being higher, the soybeans having the best strength, and a story about soybean oil and its leadership again with some more bullish enthusiasm about biofuels.
Yeah, definitely been the news we were waiting for, because we know that the news out of South America is that the harvest is going well, and so to get that boost from biofuels and from oil has got to be is a big deal. And hopefully that can even swing the momentum from that rough start from Monday, maybe continue it going this week, and if nothing major changes it.
That's right. It's been a source of leadership again, over the last three now going on this month, the start of the new calendar year. We have reports of a trade deal with India, and last year India was a large buyer of U.S. soybean oil. This trade agreement could include favorable demand for the soybean oil side, when at the same time we're talking about biofuels, and that means that soybean oil exports continue to compete with use here at home. And that helps the soybeans, of course, the expanded crush demand that we've got. Another reminder of that in the USDA crop report this week about soybean crushing. So it's a more bullish storyline that we've got the processing demand then competing with exports, not only for soybean oil, but of course for soybeans, as you mentioned, where we have this question about Chinese demand now that the Brazilian crop is filling the pipeline as we speak.
And it's a good thing, I would imagine, that we get any kind of trade agreement done with India. They're usually very protectionist, in their trade policy. And, now they're the most populous country on the earth. I mean, yes, China's a big consumer, but India, with that kind of population, is growing. And if they're opening up those borders now to help satisfy that demand, that's a big deal.
That's right. It starts with soybean oil and the grain commodities, but also the livestock. There's implications in a broader sense to support this being a new, unlocked, relatively speaking, source of demand that we could sure use. The focus of demand and how we're using these crops is certainly more friendly than the way we started the month and all of that bearish focus on the supply side.
All right, moving over to the livestock side of things. Boy, cattle and hogs had a good day yesterday. Looks like they're starting the day pretty favorable again. I mean, what kind of things are we seeing as we look at the cattle and hogs?
Certainly still a digestion of the Friday cattle inventory report. This is the semi-annual report that is a real anticipated look at whether or not, in this case, the big question is, has herd rebuilding gained any traction? And really the answer was not really. It was a bullish leaning report because you're still looking at a 75-year low for the all cattle and calves head count. You see the beef cow count being down on the year versus the average trade guest looking for a slight increase. So there is a response to the broader cycle of still being in contraction. And then the evidence from the cash market, and this includes a couple of weekends ago going into the winter storm, and how we've seen since then boosted cash trade and really support for the cattle, and same for hog contracts too that continue to move to new highs.
And it's interesting when you look at the cattle market, you're saying that we really haven't seen much of a rebuild going on. But when you look at the prices that are being based off the fact that there isn't that much of a herd number compared to what we would normally expect, it doesn't seem like there's much incentive to increase the herd sizes right now.
That's right. It's keeping them moving at this price level. And to say about other supply shortages, we still got to keep an eye on the screwworm headlines. They had feeder cattle limit lower just a couple of Fridays ago. So that and the added tightness on the other side of it from having still the Mexican border closed to what was before that problem, over 1 million head of cattle coming in. So still a lot of interesting, but lately friendly leaning developments for cattle and hogs.
All right. I was just going to ask. I know you mentioned that hogs are having some positive momentum. What is really pushing them right now?
For one, you've got domestic demand holding up well and competing. That part of the conversation about record high beef prices, and at the same time, another layer of competition with really outstanding pork exports. We've got top customer Mexico increased, but good demand from a broad base of countries right now for U.S. pork.
All right. Well, if folks want to look at some of the intel you guys are following there at Commstock, or want to pick your brains on maybe some moves they could be making, what's the best way for them to get the conversation started?
Yeah, access to our Commstock report and all of our contact info is up at commstock.com.
All right. Well, Joe Camp from Commstock's been our guest here today. Thanks so much for the insight. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thanks a lot.
At the open, we see March corn up 1 3/4 at 427.5. December new crop up 1.5 at 456.25. On soybeans, March up 8 cents at 1068.25. November new crop up 6 at 1081.25. Soybean meal is down $1 right now at 293.50. Soy oil is $1.18 higher at 54.38. Chicago wheat up 1 1/4. That is at 5.29 even. Kansas winter wheat unchanged at 5.35.25. Kansas spring wheat down 5 3/4 at 5.59.25. Minneapolis spring wheat down 2 cents at 5.69.5. Oats up 2 3/4 at 3.03.5. On the Merc live cattle down 85 cents at 237.32. Feeders down $1.22 at 365.12. Lean hogs up 12 cents at 87.87. Pork cutouts unchanged at 97.95, and Class 3 milk down 6 cents at 15.29. Thanks again to Joe Camp of Commstock Investments for joining us today on the Opening Market Podcast. I'm Dustin Huffman on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, where Iowa Ag matters.